August 13, 2026. Bamako, Mali. A French intelligence officer arrested a year earlier for allegedly plotting a coup against the Malian government walks free, pardoned by presidential decree. The same day, 82 Malian soldiers captured months earlier by an Al-Qaeda-linked terrorist coalition during coordinated attacks near Kidal are released and finally reunited with their families. One man tied to a coup plot against Mali. 82 soldiers taken by the very terrorist Mali's army is fighting. Both walk free within hours of each other on the exact same day. Is that a coincidence or is it something else? In this video, we are laying out exactly who this French agent is, exactly how those 82 soldiers were taken, and exactly what the timing between their two releases might actually mean, with the confirmed facts, the open questions, and nothing invented in between. Let's slow down and meet the people in this story first, because the details matter. Yann Vézilier is French. He worked at the French embassy in Bamako, officially accredited by Malian authorities. On August 13, 2025, exactly 1 year before his release, he was arrested, along with several Malian officers, in what Mali's government called a plot to organize a coup d'etat. Malian authorities said he was tied to French intelligence, specifically the DGSE, France's Foreign Intelligence Service. France pushed back publicly and rejected the accusations against him. In June 2026, a Malian court found him guilty of endangering the external security of the state and sentenced him to 20 years. The Malian government later described the trial as fair, a word choice that quietly answered the criticism France had been making about the case since the arrest. Now meet the 82 soldiers. They were members of the Malian Armed Forces, the FAMa. Most were captured during coordinated attacks on April 25, 2026, around the city of Kidal. Some had been held even longer, since 2023. The groups holding them were a coalition, JNIM, the Group for the Support of Islam and Muslims, which is affiliated with Al-Qaeda, and the FLA, the Front for the Liberation of Azawad, a separatist movement active in northern Mali. For 110 days, these soldiers' families didn't know if they'd ever come home. There was no daily update, no confirmed list of who was alive, just waiting. That's the human weight sitting underneath this story. A French intelligence officer on one side, 82 Malian families waiting on the other. Now here's where it gets complicated. Here's the official story, in Mali's own words. The military said the soldiers' release was the result of a plan that started from the first hours of their capture, involving careful preparation and coordinated use of all available resources. The FLA, for its part, said it released the prisoners for strictly humanitarian reasons, nothing more. But, therefore, alongside that official version, a second theory started spreading fast because of the timing. Hours after the soldiers came home, Mali's president, General Assimi Goïta, signed a pardon for Vézilier. The pardon didn't erase his guilty verdict. Mali's government was clear about that, but it ended his sentence immediately and expelled him from the country on the spot. Why would a government pardon a man it just called guilty of endangering its own security? Hours after freeing 82 of its own soldiers, that question is exactly what pushed people toward a trade theory, the idea that Vézilier's freedom was the price for the soldiers' freedom, negotiated quietly through a third country. So let's follow the actual reporting on that theory carefully, because this is where a lot of information gets blurry fast. We know France tried more than once to get Vézilier freed through diplomacy. Reports say Morocco attempted to mediate on France's behalf, but that specific effort reportedly failed. Qatar, the UAE, and Ghana also reportedly tried, without success either. That's 4 separate countries, none of them getting the job done through normal channels, which itself tells you something about how difficult and sensitive this case was for Mali's government to touch. Mali's official statement about the pardon thanked an unnamed brotherly country whose discreet diplomatic efforts, done with what Bamako called scrupulous respect for Mali's sovereignty, helped lead to the pardon, but that country was never named publicly. But therefore, here's the twist. Diplomatic sources cited by multiple outlets point not to Morocco but to Algeria as the country that actually mediated the exchange that freed the soldiers. That's a different country than the one Mali's official language seemed to be pointing toward, and a different one than France's earlier failed attempt through Morocco. 2 separate diplomatic tracks, possibly tangled together, Possibly not, each with a different country's fingerprints on it. Now here's the enemy of clarity in this whole story. Nobody in an official capacity, not Bamako, not Paris, has confirmed that a direct trade actually happened. What we have instead is a coincidence in timing that every serious outlet covering this story flags, and a question that, as of this filming, has no confirmed answer. If there was a trade, who actually negotiated with JNIM and the FLA to make the soldiers' release happen? Was it Mali's own military working the channels it always uses in hostage situations, channels built up over years of dealing with kidnappings and captures in the country's north? Was it a third country using its own separate relationships with armed groups in the region? Was there any link at all to Vézilier, or did two unrelated processes simply land on the same news day by chance, the way major stories sometimes coincidentally cluster together? This is the part where this documentary has to be honest with you. We don't know, and anyone telling you they know for certain without showing you where that certainty comes from is guessing just like the rest of us, no matter how confident they sound doing it. What we can say carefully is this: there is no confirmed sourced evidence that France has an operational relationship with JNIM as an organization. No proof that Paris can simply call up an Al-Qaeda-linked coalition and order a release. That would mean France has a direct working channel to a group its own soldiers, alongside Malian forces, have spent years fighting. A claim so serious, it would need real, named, documented evidence, not just two events landing on the same calendar day. What we do know is that France pursued diplomatic channels through other governments trying to get its own citizen freed, which is normal state behavior. The same tool almost every country uses when one of its nationals is detained abroad. Whether that diplomatic pressure indirectly created momentum that also helped free the Malian soldiers is the actual open question here, not a confirmed collision between a state and a terrorist group, which is a much bigger and much less supported claim. There's a second layer of tension worth naming directly, because it's the frustration a lot of ordinary Malians and Sahelians share: the transparency gap. Mali's government has for years criticized France and Western institutions for controlling the narrative in the region, for deciding what Africans get told about their own countries. But therefore, when it came to explaining exactly what happened on August 13th, who mediated, whether a trade occurred, why the brotherly country was unnamed, Bamako's own official communications stayed just as vague as the foreign media coverage it often criticizes. Citizens didn't get a press conference walking through the sequence of events. They got two short statements, hours apart, and had to piece the rest together themselves from foreign newspapers and unnamed diplomatic sources. If sovereignty means controlling your own story, this is a moment where that story wasn't fully told by the people who lived it, and citizens were left filling gaps with foreign reporting instead. The exact dependency Mali's leadership says it's trying to escape. And there's a historical layer under all of this that deserves its own honest mention, because language matters. Mali's Communiqués called the unnamed mediating country a brotherly nation. If that nation turns out to be Morocco, it's worth remembering that the relationship between Morocco and the region it sits beside hasn't always been brotherly in the way that word suggests today. Between 1590 and 1591, a Moroccan army, using firearms that West African forces at the time didn't have, crossed the Sahara Desert and destroyed the Songhai Empire, one of the great West African empires centered in cities like Gao and Timbuktu, cities that were at the time among the wealthiest and most educated in the entire world, home to scholars, libraries and trade networks stretching across the continent. That empire never fully recovered. That's not ancient trivia disconnected from today. It's a reminder that brotherly relationships in this region carry real, complicated history. And calling a country a brother today doesn't erase what happened between these lands centuries ago. Without knowing that history, it's hard to fully understand what a word like brotherly is actually doing in a modern diplomatic statement, and why some Malians reacted to that phrase with more suspicion than comfort. So where does this actually leave us? Here's the clean, confirmed version of events. 82 Malian soldiers, held for 110 days by a JNIM-FLA coalition, are free and back with the FAMa's care. Yann Vézilier, convicted of endangering Mali's security, is pardoned, not exonerated, and expelled from the country. Both happened on August 13, 2026, a date that will now sit permanently next to this story, whether it turns out to be a coincidence or something more. Diplomatic mediation was involved in freeing the soldiers, reportedly through Algeria. Separate diplomatic mediation, reportedly through Morocco, tried and failed to free Vézilier earlier, alongside failed attempts by Qatar, the UAE, and Ghana. Mali has not officially confirmed a trade between the two events. Here's the honest hypothesis, built only from what's actually documented. It's possible these were two separate diplomatic processes that happened to conclude in the same week, each driven by its own pressure and its own mediators. Mali working urgently to free its own soldiers, France separately working through multiple countries to free its own citizens. It's also possible that behind closed doors, the two tracks became connected at some point, with a country like Algeria or another regional player brokering something wider than what's been publicly stated. Both explanations fit the known facts, neither is proven. That's not a dodge, that's genuinely where the evidence stands right now. What this story really exposes isn't a secret alliance between France and a terrorist coalition. Nothing here proves that. And a claim that serious needs real evidence behind it, not just suspicious timing. It's worth repeating that clearly, because it would be easy for this story to slide into a much bigger accusation than the facts actually support. What it exposes is something smaller but still important, a communication gap between Sahelian governments and their own citizens. People in Mali and across the region are left piecing together their own government's decisions from foreign newspapers and unnamed diplomatic sources. The same pattern of information control these governments say they're fighting against when it comes from Paris or Brussels. If real sovereignty means owning your own story, that has to include telling it clearly, especially on the days it's complicated. This is a story about a coincidence that raised fair questions, questions this documentary has laid out honestly, without pretending to answer what genuinely isn't confirmed yet. We'll keep watching for whoever eventually goes on the record, whether that's Bamako, Paris, Algiers, or Rabat, because someone knows the full sequence of what happened that week. Until they say it publicly, everything else stays exactly what it is right now, an open question, not a closed case. And that's really the lesson worth carrying out of this video, beyond just this one story. When something looks suspicious, the right response isn't to immediately assume the worst version is true. It's to lay out exactly what's known, exactly what's still a theory, and let people think for themselves with the real facts in front of them. That's harder to do than just picking the most dramatic explanation and running with it. But it's the only way a story like this actually earns your trust instead of just your outrage.